Hello and welcome. I'm Lydia, and today I face my fear of drastically letting out a pair of trousers. My husband Dave thrifted them a while back, and I thought it would be a good challenge for me. So I hope you benefit from this journey. Also, if you enjoy my vibe, like and subscribe. Don't forget to ring the bell and comment as well. Now let's get started. The first thing I'm going to tackle is the slimming of the pants. Then I'm going to do the hemming. Then I'm going to tackle the waist because I'm going to use some of the fabric from slimming the pants to put into the waist to make it wider, and also this is a nice dark fabric, so it won't be as challenging to add a piece in and still have it look like nothing has been done to it. So that's the plan. To begin, I'm turning his trousers inside out. So for the hem, I've already determined the hem adjustment after trying the trousers on Dave. After opening the hem, I noticed how uneven it was, so I folded my pants, aligning the crotch and waistband before cutting to ensure that both legs end up at the same length. We settled on a 1.5 inch take up. I'm going to mark down 1.5 inches from that. To taper the legs of the trousers, I'm going to reference a pair of Dave's jeans. He likes the relaxed but slim fit on them and wants these trousers to have a similar taper. After laying out my trousers, I located the center of the pant leg and placed the center of my reference jeans there. Then I'm going to mark the taper on the trousers starting at the side seam of the hip and gradually following the taper of Dave's jeans. I will do the same for the inseam, which is a bit more drastic. This taper needs to be a very smooth line, otherwise it's very easy to end up with a lumpy looking seam. Fold it over, pat it, just to transfer the lines on that and also here. And then we have it on this, very faintly, but I'm just gonna fill it in. And I'm just gonna sew these up. When sewing, I ensure that the original seam is laying flat and aligned. Then I start my stitch along the original seam allowance and follow the smooth taper lines as I sew. I had Dave try them on and he was satisfied with the slight taper. Now I'm going to trim down the seam allowance to about 3/8 and then serge it. I fold up my hems and pin them in place. Then I blind stitch them by hand. This results in an invisible hem stitch on the face of the garment. Because when I'm stitching, I only grab a single yarn or thread of the fabric with each stitch. And it's completely undetectable on the other side. Now that this is complete, I'm going to iron these side seams, and then I'm going to tackle the waist. I had Dave try on the trousers and measured the distance between the buttonhole end and the button shank, or center of the button, to determine how much to let out and extend the waist.
What is it now, 36 inches?
5.5. Ow! Oh, my back, 5.5.
Oh,
5.5.
We're getting old and fat.
I know. So here we have a nice 1.25 inches to let out. So I'm going to leave it at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is quite small, and sew it up. So that will add 2.5 inches to the back seam, and then we're going to have to add 1.5 inches to each side seam. That's actually quite a lot, so we'll see how this turns out in the end. So I'm going to pin this together. I'm starting at the top with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and as I get closer to the original stitch, which is intact at the crotch, I'm going to gradually deepen the seam allowance until my stitch lines up with the original seam allowance.
This is what it looks like at the back. Take this baby out.
At the side seams, I'm beginning by opening a small portion of the waistband seam. Then I cut the waistband in line with the side seam, then open the side seam. Now to add width, I'm taking the pieces I cut off the pant leg.
To make them a bit wider, I'm going to actually take out the seam and sew a smaller seam allowance. So for the side seam, I'm going to measure how long of a piece I need. About 10.5 inches. I'm going to disregard the waistband.
I need the sliver to be 1.5 inches at the top, zeroing down to nothing with a 3/8 to 1/2 inch seam allowance. But I could only manage to get 1 1/4 inch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance on either side, which actually works well because if I also sew the pant seam allowance at a 1/4 inch, it will give me an extra 1/4 to 3/8 overall, since the seams are about 3/8 of an inch or 1/2 an inch at the side seam area.
Keep the waistband away, line it up with the top of the pant, and sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I am sewing this sliver to the back seam first. I'm going to sew it down as far as it will go. Now I'm going to sew this bit to the front piece. Now this is in and I've ironed it. I now need to add to the waistband.
The gap I need to close is 1.5 inches, so since the waistband that I cut has no original seam allowance, I need to add double the seam allowance to the extension piece. Using the hem pieces that I cut off and some scrap cotton fabric to match the inside of the waistband, I created a piece that matches the original waistband.
So I added these pieces together so that I could have a long enough piece to match the waistband at the front, and then this is to match the inside.
I matched the extension piece to one side of the waistband and sew it in place, after which I will sew the other side of the extension to the other side of the waistband.
So I'm just going to flip this around and match it to this. Pin it in place. So next I'm going to sew this to this. I'm just going to stitch in the ditch to secure it down. Also going to do this to the other side and to the center back because we took that out. So I stitched in the ditch the whole entire waistband because somehow I had taken the whole thing out. And you won't be able to see the stitches on this side unless you look really closely. Because I had to do a 1/4 inch on the side seam, this little part of the pocket that was supposed to be concealed in the side seam is now showing. So what I'm going to do to cover it is a nice bar tack that will secure it and also conceal it. Same here. There we go. and I actually lined it up with the original bar tack that was already there. So it worked out pretty nicely.
I do believe I was successful. Now go and be successful too. You got it, girl.